Good evening and welcome to Know Before You Grow. I'm Dan Like, and as always, Dave Alden and Sharon Kirk did the heavy lifting, Dave in particular this week. The topic we've got this week is near and dear to my heart because I have done a little bit of work in this space. I used to manage a database and a map for a company called Speed Gauge, which did speed reporting and various services surrounding this. And Dave and I talked a little bit about that beforehand, but I'm looking forward to this. So without further ado, let me hand it over to you and get my timer set up, Dave. And Dave, it's yours.
Okay. I just want to sort of kick it off with one story. In talking to Dan before we began this evening, he alerted me that he was already aware of some of this technology. I wasn't. And in fact, had an odd conversation last summer about the fact that two of us didn't know it existed. I think probably most of you are aware of the effort by Petaluma Healthcare District to bring the Blue Zones effort to Petaluma. Last August, they had a series of gatherings to talk about what people wanted in town, how they viewed the town. I ended up in a session chaired by the former executive director of the Congress for the New Urbanism, who I'd gotten to know a little bit at a couple different events, liked her a lot. It was fun to reconnect. And at one point during the session, she asked if you could come up with one thing you would change to make your town better. And I came back saying I would want an automatic device where cars could not go above the speed limit. And she, in a nice way, sort of balked me for, asking for science fiction. And now I realize that it wasn't science fiction. It existed. We just weren't aware of it, which is perhaps an American problem. So we will begin to address some of that deficiency today. The first video, we will watch bits and pieces of the recording of a recent video by America Walks. The first speaker will be Amy Cohen. She's with the group Families for Safe Streets. They are local activists pushing for safer streets. ISA is not their only tool, but it's one of the ones they promote. And many of them, as she will tell you, and chokes up a bit what she does, were motivated to join this group by loss of a family member. So Dan, if you want to start that first snippet.
So there's the picture of us. So we have all lost a family member or suffered a serious injury in a crash. We do have 20 chapters across the country, and here you can see where we are represented. And as I said, we've all been personally impacted. And for me, this was my son. He was 12 years old. He was in 8th grade. He was a street savvy, bright New Yorker who knew how to get around our streets, and still they are not safe enough. He was just trying to get home from school. He went to middle school in the neighborhood, which if you at all know New York City kids travel all over the city to get to school. And I was so thrilled. He only had to go a few blocks, came home, grabbed a snack, and he just had to cross the street in front of our house to get to soccer practice. And that turned out to be a deadly act. After he died, I had so much pain, it had to go somewhere. I poured it into preventing this from happening to anyone else. And we do this fight. This was one of the first graphics I saw about traffic violence after Sammy died. And I show it in every presentation, even though at this point it is outdated and the CDC has not updated the image. But the numbers sadly have not changed, which is that we perform horribly compared to nearly every other high-income nation. We have twice as many people die in traffic crashes as Canada to our north, 4 times as nearly all of the EU, Japan, Australia, many other countries. And the horrific part is, based on looking at that slide alone, we know that traffic fatalities and serious injuries are preventable. These are not accidents. We have the tools in our toolbox to prevent this heartache on our roads. I mean, for me, it's 9 years since Sammy died. And there's not a day goes by that isn't still hard. And yet, I know I can't see all of you. I didn't realize we wouldn't have all the participants on the screen, but you can, do this in your room. I doubt there is anybody on this call who will not raise their hand when I say, have you never had somebody who jokes about speeding or having a lead foot or, I had to rush to get to my destination. We take so lightly the dangers of driving too quickly. And speed kills. We have the data that shows, at lower speed limits, when people are following it, you are much more likely to survive a crash. I mean, the driver who killed Sammy was probably going 40, and you have an 8 or 9 time chance of not making it at 40. And you have a 9 time chance of surviving, a 90% chance, 9 out of 10, if the driver is only going slower. Similarly, slower driving allows people to have more time to stop. Look at the differences of this braking distance at the various speeds. Similarly, you can't nearly see as well when drivers are going fast. It really reduces your field of vision. And I will share, I heard a statistic recently that in fact, children also have a limited understanding of speed, and in that, they really can't judge how fast someone is driving over 20 miles per hour. So there's been a lot of work across the country on managing for speed with slower speed limits and with, roadway design. But we rarely talk about, other ways. And failure to address this high cost, these high speeds has a huge cost. In 2020, 11,258 people, or 29%, almost a third of everyone killed on our roadways was in a speed-related crash. It has huge impacts on, financially, but 46 billion. And it's really obvious that people don't see this as a problem because in surveys, 20% said they exceeded this posted speed limit. They readily admitted it 10 miles per hour or more, whether it's on arterials, minor arterials, all kinds of roads. People are admitting it. They're finding it in, in data that they are collecting. We know we have a crisis of speed on our roadways. But we have not moved to really put in place a solution that exists already to make sure people don't drive above the speed limit. So intelligent speed assistance is a technology that goes in the vehicle. It's onboard software that logs the position of the car using GPS data and a digital map, recognizes signs. And if the car is going above the speed limit, it first gives a warning sound, and then it automatically applies pressure on the brake so that the vehicle slows down automatically. We get a lot of questions that say, oh, well, what about an ambulance? There are overrides that allow, a very short-term one is the one they did in New York City that allows you to, if you have to pull quickly away from somebody and need to accelerate. But it's proven technology, and Kathy's going to share a lot more about the technology and how it works. But I really want to encourage people who are, either advocating for or from a municipality to lead by example, right? Our city fleets on our roadways are often a huge percentage of the vehicles on the road. And as a city employee, you have an obligation to, be your city's best self and lead by example. There is precedent for this in terms of, trucks on our roadways. A lot of municipal fleets have put in place side guards as a way to, lead by example for other commercial fleets. They've done it in New York City, San Francisco, Seattle, the state of Massachusetts, DC. So there is precedence for this. And this is really an opportunity that we are hoping you will take advantage of after today's webinar. In New York City, Families for Safe Streets really supported and advocated for a pilot program that was undertaken by DCAS, the Division of Citywide Administrative Services, putting ISA in a pilot of 50 vehicles of the city fleet. And there's been some incredible results from that pilot. During the time we've had so far, hard braking events were reduced by 36%, and vehicles complied with local speed limits 99% of the time. The 1% represented the time between, initial acceleration and the time it takes for ISA to reduce the speed. Incredible results. So there's no question that it works. So we encourage you today to join the Safe Fleet Challenge. This is your opportunity to, as municipal leaders, to lead the way and hopefully set a precedent. I mean, this is a technology that should be in every vehicle across the country, but you have control to push for this or to implement it in your city, and join the challenge and lead by example. Before we close, I do just want to share briefly, Families for Safe Streets. As I said, our mission is to confront the preventable epidemic of traffic violence through advocacy. So for pushing for legislative and policy changes like this one, as well as supporting anyone who is personally impacted. And I have to share, it was a lifesaver for me. And we want to be sure that people know that we have supports out there for anybody who's lost a family member or suffered a serious injury. We have support groups, peer mentoring, logistical assistance, a resource guide. Really, the most important message I want you to know today is that we are here with these principles to support family members. They should not go through this alone. So that's me, and that's my contact info. Happy to be in touch or answer any questions after the webinar as well.
The second video clip we're going to watch is Kathy Chase. She is with the Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. Compared to the first speaker, this group is more about the technology and also about the federal role in how it could be implemented. Mandating it in cars is something that has happened in Europe, not even part of the conversation here. That's not true. It has been part of the conversation here. It hasn't gotten much momentum, but that's what number 2 will be. We'll see you in a few minutes.
For those of you who aren't familiar, Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety is a nonprofit lobbying organization. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C. We work on the federal and state levels to pretty much make the road safer for all road users. We have a board of directors that is comprised of some of the leading property casualty insurance companies and some of the leading public health safety, consumer and law enforcement organizations and individuals. We were created in 1989, so we've been around for a bit. And our mantra, if you will, is pretty aligned with what has come to known lately as the safe system approach, which acknowledges that people will make mistakes on the roadways and that people have a limited tolerance for injury. And it takes these concepts into effect when moving forward with solutions, which include safer vehicles, safer roadways, safer drivers and road users, and then post-crash care. This is something that Advocates has been working on for over 30 years, and we're thrilled to be embracing this new technology, along with other technologies in cars, to address the epidemic that's happening on our roadways. As Amy mentioned, nearly 30% of fatal crashes involve speeding. And this would not be tolerated in any other type or mode of transportation. And yet it happens every year, year after year on our roadways. The good news is that we do have proven solutions like ISA or Intelligent Speed Assist. And I was asked to talk today about what ISA is, but simply put, as Amy already mentioned, it's technology that you install in the car to prevent someone from traveling over the speed limit. Now, what do we come up against in terms of, backlash or opposition on that issue is people like to speed or people do speed. And if you ask someone, a parent especially, if they would like to have this technology in their cars for their teenagers, I would venture to guess, almost every parent would say yes. So similarly, if we want it for our teenagers, we should want it for everyone because everyone is sharing the roads with each other. So ISA is an in-vehicle system that provides information to the driver. So on the vehicle speed relative to the posted speed limit. Also, it may discourage them from further increasing speed past the limit if the driver doesn't take action. There are 2 types of ISA systems, active and passive. The passive system will only alert the driver when the driving is above or exceeding the speed limit. It's up to the driver to take the action. The active response by the technology can work in several ways. One system can introduce resistance to gas pedals, making it harder, but still possible to speed. The most aggressive automated systems limit gas flow, restraining the engine so drivers can accelerate up to, but not over the speed limit. This can be used on both an electric car and your traditional combustion engine. ISA can be overridden by the driver. That's really important to assert because one of the comments we receive is, well, what if there's an emergency and someone needs to speed up? It is possible for a driver to exceed the limit set. Some manufacturers also offer built-in top speed limiters that must be set manually, whereas some systems will automatically limit the top speed to the posted speed limit. The systems do work in real time, mainly with GPS devices linked to speed limits. Some may use onboard sensors or cameras that read the speed limit signs and then integrate speed limit data with vehicle information on speed. I also just wanted to share that this, as I mentioned earlier, this is not new technology. In fact, Europe is way ahead of the US in adopting and mandating ISA in vehicles. The largest research efforts studied several thousand Swedish drivers using systems giving an advisory alert, pedal feedback, or throttle constriction for more than a year. And they found a decrease in speeding violations for each system. In fact, by July of next year, all new cars in Europe will have ISA installed. So this is not something cutting edge. This is the US falling behind and needing to catch up what's happening in other countries. In addition to the Safe Fleets Challenge we're discussing today, which Advocates wholly endorses, of course, we continue to push for federal legislation to require ISA. And in fact, many of you, I would venture to guess, are quite familiar with the transportation law, also known as the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, or the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was enacted last year. And we pushed very hard to get an ISA requirement in it. In fact, There was one in the House version of the bill, the Invest Act, which was inspired by a standalone bill by Congressman Jan Schakowsky of Illinois. But unfortunately, during the debate process, it did not make it into the final bill. Needless to say, we haven't given up, and we do firmly believe that a federal requirement is needed in order to get this technology into all cars. We also have been pushing for other technology to address some of the other main contributors to fatalities on our roadways, which are, in addition to speeding, alcohol impairment and distraction, and also people not buckling up. Again, there are technological solutions to all of these that we're pushing for, including automatic emergency braking, which just a little side note, a proposal has been sent by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to the White House for its review. So we continue to urge strongly the U.S. Department of Transportation to issue this rule, which will address so many of the problems happening on our roadways. So back to ISA, which is an essential technology. It's just not required yet. So that's why we are participating in these challenges, so that we can not only make the road safer, but also get the public to have a higher level of acceptance of how these work, which will go hand in hand with getting them into all cars, which, as Amy said, is our ultimate goal. So in doing so, we have been advancing minimum performance standards as the way to accomplish getting them into cars. And I just want to mention that there's an equity issue involved with this. If these technologies are not included as standard equipment, then there can be an upcharge for them, and not everyone can afford that. I often say, every family deserves a vehicle with the safest braking system. Similarly, everyone should be protected, all road users, especially vulnerable road users like pedestrians and bicyclists, from speeding vehicles. And this is a wonderful technological advancement to make that happen. In conclusion, I just wanted to say that what Amy said, speed kills. It's an old mantra. It should not be a punchline. It should be a cautionary note. And as speed limits are increasing throughout the country, and advocates has been battling numerous pieces of legislation throughout the country that to increase speed limits at a time when fatalities are skyrocketing on our roadways, we should be using every tool that we are familiar with that has been proven to be effective in reducing crashes, like ISA, like AEB, to make our cars safer, to make all road users safer, so that families are not suffering the losses, so that people are not involved in preventable crashes, and so that all of the ripple effects, the unquantifiable benefits are realized. The unquantifiable problems aren't occurring, like the drain on emergency rooms, on first responders, on even traffic and environmental concerns in terms of pollution. There are so many things that happen when a crash occurs. And we know there are solutions, and that's why we're involved in getting ISA into the fleets with this challenge, and ultimately into all new vehicles. Thank you again, Mike and the America Walks team and Amy, and I can't wait to listen to what Jorge has to say about their experience. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy.
And as soon as I shut off my timer here, I will zip forward to the next.
Okay, well, while
spot.
you're doing that, I will say that this upcoming segment is my favorite, because it really gets down to what it is like on the road, what's it like to implement it. The first speaker you're seeing on the screen now is Mike McGinn. For those of you who've been with us for a while, may remember Mike speaking to us March of 2022, just over a year ago. He is the former mayor of Seattle. He is now the executive director of America Walks. He talked to us that evening about how change happens. And the thing that really impressed him that night is that KBYG isn't just a group of random residents. It includes electeds. And tonight I see two of the people in the room are on the council, and city employees. Tonight, all we have is one former city employee, but again, we have a warrior conflict. So I like Mike a lot. I hope to see him in Charlotte in a couple of weeks. I'm there for a conference. And then from there, he will speak with Jorge Bonilla, who is the fleet operations manager for Ventura County, a place that has begun implementing ISA on some county rigs, and he can share some of his experiences. Dan, if you want to kick it off, go for it.
Now's probably a good time to throw it into the chat before I start talking with Jorge. We're launching a campaign to try to get 50 governments, whether city, county or state governments to retrofit their vehicles with intelligent speed assistance. So it's not just a feature available on new cars. It's an over-the-counter opportunity to buy the equipment to make government vehicles follow the speed limit. So we have a fact sheet that you can take a look at. We have a draft executive order or council resolution. As some of you may know, I'm the former mayor of Seattle. Management of the fleet is not often a matter of legislative action. It's usually left to the executive and the department head to manage the vehicles they buy and to use the money that they're given effectively and to encourage safety in the use of the vehicles. So this is something that a mayor and a department head could do on their own without legislative action. But it's also something that a legislator, whether again at the state, the county, or city level, could, or an agency, a transit agency or other independent government outside of that, could choose, a legislator could choose to raise this issue with the executive branch and ask for action. So for example, in King County, Washington, the King County Council has asked the executive to come back with a report about the installation of intelligent speed assistance on its vehicles. So that's why there is a draft executive order / council resolution. And it's just something to get your local elected officials or agency officials thinking about how could they implement this. And again, our goal is we want to get 50 places by 2025. And as Kathy said, in addition to saving lives, I mean, I really, why it's hard for me to understand why city employees or public employees, excepting emergency vehicles, of course, why they should violate the speed limit set by their own government. So I think it's a great starting point to build acceptance, build understanding, and ultimately lead to broader safety standards. And of course, this is accompanying designing streets better and other efforts as part of the safe systems approach. So with that, I'm going to do a little interview here with Jorge because Ventura County is actually doing the work. So we just want to share his experience on this. So Jorge, why don't you start off by just telling us who you are and what your job is?
Well, my name is Jorge Bonilla. I am the fleet operations manager for the county of Ventura, and we're located in Southern California. We are fairly new to this project with the intelligent speed governor system. The reason how we rolled onto it is because we stumbled onto it due to telematics that we installed in our vehicles. If people are not familiar with telematics, it's a device that we installed that we can get mileage data, fuel data, and speeding data in there. So when we started pulling all these reports, we noticed that, hey, we got a lot of speeders in the county. And just to let you know, the county of Ventura, I manage about 1,900 vehicles, and about 1,500 of those vehicles are vehicles that actually travel on the roads that people drive on every day. The other few hundred vehicles are construction equipment that really don't travel on the road. So we noticed the speeding violations that were just excessive. I mean, there were some pretty bad ones on there.
Give me a few examples of the speeding, Jorge. I mean, without naming names, but you
So
have the data.
Ventura County doesn't have, the largest freeway that runs through Ventura County is the 101. 65 miles an hour is the top speed limit. So we had a couple in there that 103 miles an hour. And these are county employees that, get paid by the hour, regardless of how fast or slow you're going. No reason to be traveling that rate. To me, it doesn't matter. They weren't a first responder. They weren't law enforcement. They were just a regular old county employee. And yeah, there's a few of those. School zones, 25 mile an hour school zones or residential. We're seeing 50 to 60 mile an hour reports in those. So that raised a big red flag. Our initial, the way we approach this is we ran the reports, introduced them to the departments because there's multiple departments with the county. We don't manage drivers, we manage the vehicles. So we let them, hey, here's a report, here's what you got. You got to do something about this. You're gonna kill somebody, you're gonna hurt somebody. And we noticed that the speeding still continued. So then I started looking around, speed governors, intelligent speed governors, which I call non-intelligent speed governors. And we found a vendor that I did some background, talked to him, and I got a good feeling for them. And I'll just throw their name out there. Sturdy Corporation out of North Carolina. And they had both systems. So I said, okay, let's run a pilot on a few of our vehicles. And I was very impressed with the speed with the intelligent one, because you could set it however you want, whether you want them to only travel at the posted speed limit, maybe a few miles above the posted speed limit or below the posted speed limit. So we did a pilot on those, and we got very good positive feedback from the departments, because now the managers, supervisors don't have to manage speeding violations, because in actuality, there will be no more speeding violations. So the other governor would only top you out at top speed. So it would only top out at 75 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour. So basically a freeway speed. The smart governor you could use on all the roads and the streets, school zones. It's a very neat system. We're very impressed with it. The hard sale is a cost, obviously, but another department is Human Services Agencies. They are on board now. We're gonna do 80 of their vehicles that we just started about 2 weeks ago, installing it on theirs. So hopefully other departments fall behind that. One of the biggest things, obviously, is cost to them. How much does it cost? And it's taxpayers' money. It's not in their budget. Is one of the roadblocks we're getting from the departments right now, why they can't install it.
But before I get to that, more on the cost issue, in the vehicles you've installed it so far, what are you seeing with regards to speeding now in the vehicles in which it's installed?
There is no speeding, because they really can't. They can't speed.
That's just amazing.
Yeah,
It just solves the problem.
Yeah, it really does. Managers actually, like I said, managers are happy because they don't have to manage the drivers now as far as their speeding. Now they can actually do their job. The public is safe. The streets are safe. And there was a little, pushback from drivers. Why, I need to go faster so I can get my job done faster. And that is not a good enough reason for us to not implement this device in the vehicles.
Are you able, in talking to manufacturers, one of the things they point to is the fuel savings from the lower speeds.
Mhm.
Have you been able to get data yet on fuel savings from these vehicles and how that compares to the cost of installation?
Not yet, because we're fairly new into this. We're probably 6 months into the first pilot and just starting the larger pilot. So that's probably data we'll probably have in a year or two, or at least better data to see how that is. But that's definitely.
So for people who are watching, who are wondering about the cost, what we have heard is that because you also have it also limits acceleration to a certain degree. So when you limit both acceleration and speed, that's when the engine's using the most gas. So
Sure.
there is definitely a fuel savings.
There's definitely going to be a fuel savings. It's just, unfortunately, I don't have that data just yet.
Right.
But we'll definitely have it here in the near future.
And the claim that is made by the manufacturers is based on the fact that this is actually in operation on many commercial fleets for the reasons of safety and fuel savings as well.
Correct.
Solves their management issues as well.
Yeah. And our biggest concern was the safety.
Right.
Fuel savings and maintenance of the vehicles was second to the safety aspect of this. It's just way too many speeding violations going across our county. So that was the number one. That has been the number one driver.
I'm really glad you spoke about that, because I can imagine that some cities are going to say, well, our employees behave safely. But I think with your experience of tracking speed, we also got the report from San Francisco. San Francisco tracked how city vehicles were being used. And they found the same thing, that there's a significant number of employees who, while using city vehicles on city business, are speeding.
Oh yeah.
So it's not that this is an inherently safer set of vehicle users.
No,
Maybe the public is worse than city employees or state employees, but what we learned is that public employees, there's a set of public employees who are not safe drivers.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in actuality, right, they drive them the way they drive them because it's not their vehicle. So, sometimes we say, pedal to the metal. If it was their vehicle, they probably wouldn't drive them like that. And with this, again, with the telematics that we initially installed, that's how the ball got rolling. And that's how we started seeing all these harsh brakings, harsh accelerating, speeding violations. That's what opened our eyes with, whoa, this is a large problem. It's not a small scale problem. That 103 mile an hour one, that was just one vehicle compared to the thousands, the 1,000 vehicles that we have in our fleet that potentially could be speeding every day.
And there we have it. And you're muted, Dave, which is probably good. or it's probably good in the meantime.
Okay. Well, look, it's a small group tonight. There's no reason to use chat to ask questions. I am an expert only to the extent that I've watched this video 3 times. You've watched it once. So that's my very tiny edge. But any questions you have, I will try to answer them as best I can.
So I, of course, would be interested in knowing what the city's already doing on this front. The speed gauge product that I was most familiar with, they did have an in-cab warning system, and it might have been tied into the driving. But we got a sample every couple of seconds, and then the system I ran checked that against a map of the world and tried to figure out whether they were speeding or not. And so the feedback for the non-in-cab systems was via management, as he mentioned. It's kind of a problem. But the thing that struck me about that is apparently big commercial fleets are generally self-insured or insured of like a 50% stop loss to $2 million. So the fleet managers have huge incentives to make sure that the drivers are behaving incredibly safely. And when you went in and said, you know, we can tell you how fast your drivers are going and when they're driving unsafely, it was every large fleet operator at this point has some sort of solution that does this, because they already have the telemetry information in the trucks. So I'd kind of be shocked if Petaluma doesn't have at least telemetry and speed reporting from the vehicles.
If
But
you're asking that question to me, I have absolutely no idea, and I'm not sure a council member would know either, but John or Dennis, if you can enlighten us.
No, I haven't heard of anything as yet about that. I know we're doing all sorts of other things. We're even purchasing some electric bikes for a small fleet of those so that we can see if folks are doing those things. So we're doing all sorts of things, but doing that, not yet. And even in the electric vehicles, because we're buying mostly police cars, electric vehicles, and those are not going to have governors on those. But there's just a couple vehicles that we have bought, Ford Truck Lightning and others, and being that they're already electrical based and they don't have autopilots in them, but they've got to be something. So I'll be sure to ask coming up and sort of look at these recommendations. And I think the public, and then where my concern comes in is adaptation or adoption by groups of people. Like if it's mandated, if you're a government employee, yes, that's understand. Yeah, you're just going to do it. If you're with an insured company, a large company that because and they actually put us through driver training and everything. I mean, huge program for safety, because one accident completely blows out their insurance costs. So I know large companies are very hip to reduce any accident whatsoever. So they're going to follow along with this. But for general public, I think we might be heading a possibility in that direction, because let's look at how much autopilot now we have in Teslas, which have all of a sudden become real popular and very common, that folks brag about their autopilot systems and how they do and what they do with them. And so basically this is just an autopilot system that it just kind of checks you in case you do something and warns you at least. So the public may be ready, more ready now than they were in the past for something like this, like especially when it's explained through safety belts and the like. But it's still going to be a push and shove a little bit to get over the hump, to get public acceptance. But from a government employee point of view, I can actually make that recommendation next city council member from this meeting that says, hey, I heard about this, there's a possibility here, and can we get this started to apply in at least our fleet vehicles, especially all the new ones that are coming in electric as a standard feature that we're going to ask for all new vehicles. So that's a very possible, I think, and very acceptable, I think, within our immediate population here that we work with and serve with. Extending it out, that I'd like folks to talk about. Would you be willing to put it in your car? And who's going to pay for it? And what's the cost to it? Because I didn't hear that described. Are we talking about a few $100s? Or are we talking about $1,000 to install these types of systems? So that's a critical factor for getting acceptance going. Because seat belts, yeah, it's very cost effective, low price. This system, especially with the different diverse electrical GPS systems out there, to try to get a system that's going to apply to every type of car, new and old, it might be a little more difficult. So it might be part of if it's connected to a phone and the phone has an app on it, yeah, that could be just automatic thing in the phone if the car responds to your phone app. That might be another way of doing it. the technology is here. So I'm all for using this type of stuff. I'd like to hear from others now.
I'll respond to a couple of your questions there on cost. It's probably part of the video we didn't show, but I believe the system that Ventura County is implementing is about $1,200 to $1,300 per car. So real money, but not a huge amount. And then there was also reference to Europe requiring this to be a factory install on all new cars beginning a year or two from now, which probably both drops the cost and makes it something you can finance. So two different ways it could be addressed. Any other comments? Hey, Joe, I'm surprised to see you here this evening. Obviously working on a transit district is somewhat different than maybe an overall city fleet, but do you have any experience with ISA or equivalent or similar systems? Oh, and for those who don't know, Joe used to be the transit manager here in Petaluma, left about, what, 5-6 years ago?
Wow. Yeah, 6 years coming up on, yeah, it's good to be here, Dave. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I just saw this topic and I couldn't resist because it's so, so fascinating. And, on the transit side, we've got this ability, in two ways. So some of the vehicles can be put a governor, and I think I heard somebody mention, one of the speakers mentioned governor. Some of the buses come with governors that won't let them go more than about 65 or so on the highway. But just in general, the AVL CAD systems, which are the automatic vehicle location systems that track all the buses and tell the riders, how many minutes until they get to the stop, that sort of thing. They all report on the speed. What they don't do is, intervene with the driver and slow them down. So they'll report, so we can run reports and then talk to the driver like the speaker from Ventura was saying. But I think it's all out there. And then a lot of the insurance apps as well. I know, I think Allstate offers like a smart drivers app, and basically it tracks your driving and tries to incentivize, speed limit adherence. So, I think it's a great idea. I'd like to see it out there. Obviously, we want to make the roads more safe for everybody, especially the vulnerable users. I think it might also maybe shine a brighter light on the speed limit setting process, because I think we've all run into speed limit segments on different roads like, wow, how'd this get to be so low? Or why is this so dang high? So I think it might actually shine, can't speak. Forgive me, I'm out east, it's late here. I think it would shine a brighter light on that issue though, Dave, sometimes the speed limits are maybe not set in the most scientific or perfect way. But yeah, I think it'd be a great idea to see more an expansion of this deployment.
Now, you make a really good point about speed limits. We've been talking for a couple of years now about, the 20 is plenty idea. Some cities have already adopted rules that no streets other than arterials will have speed limits above 20 miles an hour. But it's hard to get compliance with that if you're relying on driver reaction, because they sense that the road was designed to be driven at 35, so they drive it at 35 regardless of what the sign says. This technology gets around that. Instead of forcing us to do expensive road modifications to send a different message to the driver, we just tell the car slow down. It's a lot cheaper. So yeah, that's one thing that really grabbed my attention. Anybody else?
I'm just interested in when I can get it for my vehicles, and as importantly, or perhaps more importantly, when I can get it on everybody else's vehicle. But one of the things that we've talked about is that often with automated enforcement systems, there is a problem of equity because the enforcement systems are applied in limited places. And so people drive faster on the roads, which happen to be in the poor neighborhoods for all of the road design reasons. And so if you put your speed cameras out where the worst speeding is happening, you're going to get a lot more poor people caught up in it. If you can build a system that creates enforcement for everybody, that solves a lot of the equity issues. And you also don't have to get this on all of the vehicles, because if you get it on enough of the vehicles that they're driving the speed limit, then you have intermixed traffic and everybody has to.
Agreed. Like, I think it's a great argument.
I just, yeah, don't know how much leverage other than publicity we can do from our little town.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, everyone in town having it, yeah, that's gonna have to take state or more likely federal action. But if we can get individual fleets, city, any other, I can't think what employers in town have a fairly large fleet, maybe taxi cabs. It all makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a couple of vehicles, usually large corporation types that say I drive the speed limit, or if my drive is unsafe for doing that. I've also, even way back when I drove U-Haul trucks, I was driving around and they were allowed to go 55 miles an hour, and then they just like putter. It says, sorry, I'm not going to go any faster than that. In fact, if you try, I'm going to get slower. And so is there a way of, if we do install this and say we have a few vehicles doing this, should we have signs on the backside saying this vehicle only goes the speed limit? So that folks behind, instead of honking their horns, realizes that there's restrictions on the vehicle in front of them, that there's nothing the driver can do about it. Because at least to get this publicly out there, because I can see if I'm the first vehicle that's doing this and I'm going 25 through a school zone, and especially over there in Old Adobe Road, going by the Old Adobe School, elementary school, which everybody's going, oh, they slow from 60 down to 50, maybe 40 if we're lucky. And then the folks are kind of going around us if we're going slower than that. And so it's like, okay, I got to keep up a little bit. Otherwise, I'm creating accidents before or after me, or people trying to pass me type thing. So we do try to slow down, but we scared to almost slow down all the way down to 25 in that zone because of all the speeders that are trying to get by. So at least some warning signs may be needed on the first vehicles that have this installed, and some warning of some sort. And then when you have cars that actually know how close other vehicles are and how fast you're going and how fast other vehicles are going, there might be some technologies there to honk back at the car behind us instead of in front of us, saying, hey, get off my tail. Anyway, any other ideas?
Well, I was just going to say, I think the bumper sticker idea is great. And not just because if you have a car traveling at the speed limit, you're telling the driver behind, that's why they're going that speed. But even if you're at a traffic signal and you see a city vehicle saying, I will only drive the speed limit, that is sending a message, even though nobody's moving at that moment. It's sending a message about how much importance we put to safe driving and following speed limits. So good idea. And yes, I think we should do that.
Cool.
Yeah, that would help market the technology as well, Dave.
Absolutely. Probably get those bumper stickers for free from the manufacturer. Any other questions, thoughts?
Is there any grant money out there that anybody has heard of that may offer this? So if I start pilot programs that we could apply to?
I reached out to Mike McGinn, telling him we were going to do this evening, hoping he maybe had some information like that. He hasn't gotten back to me yet. Hopefully he will, and I will ask that question, John. It's a good question.
Yeah, because then, because I know our city with the extra staff that we were building up, and there's with 2 grant writers now available, that if there's grants available, we can put them right on top of that to which would fit into our whole transport goals that we're seeking, besides just miles transported. And I think hopefully everyone's aware that the most efficient of speeds for a gas car is between 55 and 60 miles per hour. You go over 60 miles per hour, there's a huge decrease in its efficiency. But for electric cars, it's actually between 20 and 30 miles per hour is the most efficient speed. So as we move to electric car vehicles and multiply those out, actually reducing the speeds, it makes us totally more energy efficient. So we need to get that message out. That's the other reason why we're reducing speeds down, because as we move our fleets from gas to electric, that we definitely need to shift into this lower speed range for efficiency, just total energy efficiency.
Good information. Thank you. Okay, I think we may have reached the end of the road here, so to speak. John, how about if you get back to me regarding what current city policies, practices are in place? We share it with folks. Maybe we have a record of who was on this particular call and just see what, you know, if there is commitment to pushing for changes at City Hall or elsewhere in our community, let's figure out a way to get behind this, because I think it is a worthwhile goal.
Yeah.
That sound good?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I have a personal thing about this because it was my oldest brother 50 years ago who had a traffic accident and was killed at that time. And I still have flashbacks, even now, 50 years later. Occasionally we'll have flashbacks and I'll actually envision the entire situation over and over again. So I know this is like a long-term, how people are affected by this. And so anytime we can save a single life like that. So for me, it's also a personal thing.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I will go to, but what I'm gonna do right now, before I go back to the Warriors game, my wife's watching it downstairs. I'm gonna write a little summary of what we've just talked about. And maybe submit that to our city manager and see what type of response, and if she spreads, because that way she'll spread it down to staff and go, hey guys, here's some new ideas. So what do you think?
Sounds good. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. All right.
I think we're done. Go watch the Warrior game.
Thank you all for coming. And Dave, I will watch that video and we'll try to put something together for next week. Or I mean,
2 weeks from now, May 24th.
Cool. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks,
Night
guys.
all.
It's a good thing you, Joe.
Likewise. Take care. Go Warriors.